you have to recognize that you can actually reclaim lands and territories. In fact, as a matter of fact, I believe that the enemy really hopes that people don't wake up to the fact that God gives us a responsibility over lands and territories. And many people give up their territories, physical territories and spiritual territories, because they're just like, the battle is too fierce. I can't do this. I'm just going to let it go. So people give up their inheritance. Some people even give up on their nations and they walk away because it's like the warfare is too much, But you have to understand that sometimes destiny is locked, not because of demons, but because of land. If the land in itself is not restored and it's not healed, it has the potential to affect the destinies of the people in the land. Now, when God was describing the land he was going to give to Abraham, and to his bloodline, to his generations, God described the land talking about a land flowing with milk and honey, and olive oil and all of these things. And the fruit of the land is good and all of that, because there is something about the land and the blessing of God that is promised to the people. So because man was made from the dust of the earth, you cannot separate the destiny of man from the destiny of the earth. And so when you even look at the story of humanity comes into the scene after Lucifer had fallen to the earth, to this location. And God raises us to be gatekeepers over the location. And you even look at the end story of humanity and how it keeps telling the story about how there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, and we are reigning and ruling with God forever. Location, so you then realize that you cannot effectively teach about bloodlines and teach about blessings and teach about authority and power without talking about reclaiming locations and locational blessings that God has. And you have to understand that the land belongs to God. When God begins to lay claims over something, you then realize that it's important. So for example, in Leviticus 25:23, God was speaking and God is like, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. So God is speaking about the fact that the land belongs to him. So even though they had access to the land, but the land was his. So God makes covenants with lands. So God's covenant, he's cutting a covenant with Abraham, and he's cutting a covenant around land. God often raised leaders and rulers and judges to stand over the land. As a matter of fact, they go into captivity in Babylon, and they are there for 70 years. And when you calculate the amount of times that they had dwelt in the land and were not observing the 7th-year Sabbath of allowing the land to fallow every 7 years, they didn't do that for a time that was approximately like 400 and almost 470 years or something like that. You realize that God took back every 7 years that they didn't give as according to his commandments to let the land fallow. So when you put that every 7 years together, it comes to 70 years. So they go into captivity in Babylon for 70 years, which should have been the 70 years that they allowed the land to fallow. And one of the ways God speaks about it when he's recounting their captivity is like, oh yeah, that is great because now the land is going to rest. So God is actually allowing their captivity so that the land will rest. So God actually ties a lot of blessings and a lot of covenants to families, but ties the families to the land. So how do you reclaim family territories that have been taken? I would say that one of the things you should do if you're going to be an effective bloodlines student is that you have to research like ancestral lands. In Nehemiah 7 verse 3-5, when Nehemiah is trying to restore the people, and he's trying to do that by rebuilding the gates. But in Nehemiah 7, it shows how genealogies tied people back to their inheritance. So, he's listing out this genealogy and saying this is the inheritance that they have in the land. So there are certain lands and people that have certain inheritances. So for example, Nigeria, where I'm from, in Nigeria, they often talk about the Igbos and talk about how the Igbos are very industrious. That's not a mistake. it's actually something God has given to them, and it's tied to the territory of their habitation. So you can't effectively talk about the bloodlines of the Igbos and not go back to why are they the way that they are, and how is it connected to the region that they are in. So you realize that within that region of the eastern part of Nigeria, there's like people are businessmen, there's a lot of businesses, there's a lot of creativity and stuff like that. It's connected to the bloodline. So if you don't do like an ancestral lands research, many times you wouldn't even know, what is being stolen from you and what you should be insisting on as an inheritance.